Before anyone noticed her, she had already learned how to disappear. Before anyone spoke her name, she had learned how to listen to silence. This is a story about what happens when someone, who was never meant to belong, refuses to vanish. Nia Carter grew up in a house that never truly called her by name, not because anyone forgot it, but because no one felt the need to say it. Her name existed the way spare tools do, used when work demanded it, ignored when there was anything to be shared. She understood this early, from the way conversations stalled when she entered a room, from the empty chair kept against the wall during meals prepared for three, with her bowl added last as an afterthought. Her mother died before Nia understood what it meant to stay. Her father, gentle but easily worn down, could not live long with an empty house. He remarried, bringing home a widowed woman and her daughter, Clara. Two girls the same age entered the house that same autumn, yet from the beginning they stood in different places. Clara was the one who needed protecting. Nia was the one old enough to understand. No one ever said it aloud, but everything was arranged accordingly. Clara was given her own room, a window opening toward the apple orchard. Nia slept in the narrow room at the end of the hall, where wind slipped through loose boards at night. Clara was asked if she was tired. Nia was reminded to try harder. She was not treated cruelly. She was simply not kept. Then her father died. No long illness, no final words, only a road accident quick enough to leave everything unfinished. The funeral was orderly, well attended. People spoke of a good man taken too soon. No one spoke of the daughter standing at the back, gripping the hem of her dress, holding herself upright by will alone. After the funeral, nothing changed and everything did. Nia was not sent away, but there was no one left on her side. The house continued as before, centered on the woman who now ruled it, and Clara, approaching the age when people began to call a girl beautiful. Nia stayed because there was nowhere else to go. She worked more, spoke less, learned to move quietly so she would not disturb what had already been decided. In the evenings, she lingered on the porch longer than necessary, not to escape, just to breathe. From there she could see the kitchen light, hear the careful laughter of the two women inside, and remind herself that silence was not always defeat. That spring, the house grew busier than usual. An engagement gathering was planned, modest but deliberate, enough for the region to know Clara would marry a man whose name carried weight. Edgar Blackwell owned cattle ranges stretching to the valley's edge. The wealthiest man for miles around, he was polite, precise, and carried in his eyes a coldness people could not name, but never ignored. Guests arrived early. Voices filled the house like a fresh coat laid over old walls. Clara stood at the center in a pale dress, her smile practiced and steady. Edgar stood beside her, his hand resting lightly at her back. Close enough to claim, distant enough to avoid haste. Nia stayed at the room's edge. No one introduced her. No one asked her thoughts. She carried trays, cleared plates, moved between congratulations that were never meant for her. The hanging lamp's light did not reach where she stood. She had long learned how to live there. It was from that edge of the light that a man's gaze stopped. August Wilder did not stand near Edgar. He leaned against a wooden post, tall, quiet, a man used to watching instead of appearing. Edgar's cattle manager, trusted because his work demanded steadiness when things turned rough. His eyes did not search for attention. They simply met Nia as she stood still with a tray in her hands, back straight, her gaze neither pleading nor defiant. In that brief moment, August recognized something familiar, the look of someone overlooked in the middle of a crowd. Nia felt the look before she turned. When their eyes met, it was not long, but long enough for both to understand that some people do not need introductions to be seen. The gathering continued. Laughter swelled. Edgar remained the center of every congratulation. But at the edge of the light, something quiet had begun. Unnoticed by anyone who did not yet know, it would not end there. While Edgar Blackwell stood like a pillar built for every gaze to lean on, August Wilder stepped outside that orbit. He did not need praise or raised glasses. His work had taught him to stand where few people looked, because from there he could see more. And from there he saw Nia Carter. She was not dressed to be admired. Her dark dress was simple, uninviting of praise. She did not stand near the main table or beside the future bride. She moved behind chairs, refilling water, clearing plates just emptied. Her movements were clean and practiced, like someone accustomed to finishing before being asked. But her eyes did not ask permission. August noticed that at once. There were eyes that lived by allowance. Hers did not. As she passed, the tray in her hands tilted. A glass slid toward the table's edge. No one else noticed. August stepped in before it fell, caught the glass and set it back. The movement was quick without display. "Let me," he said quietly. Nia looked up, startled not by his touch, but by the fact that someone had seen what she was doing. She nodded and let him take the tray for a moment. Their hands brushed, just a beat long enough for her to feel the steadiness in how he stood. They carried the tray into the kitchen together. No one noticed. In the quieter yellow light, August set the tray down. "You work hard," he said, not as a question. Nia shrugged. "There's work to do." The answer glozed nothing, but it did not invite either. August nodded, understanding. He poured water, lined glasses with care. "August," he said, handing the tray back. "If you need help, say so." Nia met his eyes a second longer. "Thank you," she said, small but sincere. When they returned, the room was full. Edgar noticed them enter together. His gaze paused, not jealous but attentive. Control was Edgar's language, and when something shifted even slightly, he marked it. His eyes passed over Nia like an unneeded detail, then rested on August. A thin smile, a nod, nothing spoken, but something noted. Nia set the tray down and returned to her place. Aware now that someone had seen her standing there, August leaned back against his post again. He did not look at her, not to avoid her, but because he had already seen enough to know he would again. Edgar continued laughing. Clara continued smiling. The evening moved on as planned. Only the gaze that did not belong had already found its match. Edgar did not approach Nia at once. He was accustomed to being sought, not to taking first steps. Yet throughout the gathering, one still point held his attention. She did not try to be seen or unseen. The familiarity drew his eye. He approached while she cleared plates. "You're Mr. Carter's daughter," he said politely. Nia nodded. "Yes," Edgar smiled. "I didn't see you introduced." "There's nothing to introduce," Nia replied. Edgar studied her longer than manners required, measuring as he measured land. "You've lived here long?" "All my life." Edgar glanced toward Clara, then back. "This house will change after Clara and I are married." Nia said nothing. "I expect you'll manage," he added, concluding the matter. Nia bent to pick up a cloth, a pretext enough to leave. Edgar watched her go, expression unreadable. Across the room, August had seen it all. He could not hear the words, but he recognized the posture of power. His watchfulness sharpened. In the kitchen, Nia steadied her hands and breathed. When she returned, August met her eyes. No comfort, only acknowledgement. The gathering ended, as such things always did. But something had been planted. Quiet things, Nia knew, were often the most dangerous. The decision was made without discussion. Edgar would drive a herd south. Clara wanted to go. Her mother approved. Nia knew she would go too. Journeys required someone to handle details, and those details always fell to her. "You should go," her stepmother said evenly. Nia nodded. August was put in charge. When he saw Nia packing, he tightened her saddle strap carefully. "If the horse shifts, keep your hand here," he said. Their closeness lingered. The road opened under harsh sun. Dust rose. Clara rode near Edgar, bright against the land. Nia stayed back. When her horse faltered, August steadied her. "You all right?" She nodded. Night fell. Camp was quiet. Edgar corrected a young hand sharply. No one spoke. He ordered August to shorten the route. August hesitated, then agreed. Clara followed Edgar to the tent when told. Edgar's gaze lingered on Nia, possessive now. "Remember your place," he said softly. "I know where I stand," Nia replied. August watched, resolve hardening. That night Nia lay awake. August kept watch longer than usual. The true face had shown itself, and it could not be unseen. The argument did not erupt because of a raised voice. It surfaced the way fractures always do, from pressure applied too long in the same place. It began with a small order from Edgar, something that might have passed unnoticed if not for the way he delivered it. tightening the air around the fire like a noose. Nia had been quiet all day, quiet in the way that gathers weight. When Edgar repeated her place without courtesy this time, she answered. Just one sentence, calm even, but enough to break the habit of silence he relied on. "You're not here to decide," Edgar said, lowering his voice. It was the most dangerous tone he used. "And I'm not here to be controlled," Nia replied. The pause dropped over the camp, heavy and unmistakable. Edgar stared at her, his gaze sharp enough that others looked away on instinct. Clara stood behind him, fingers twisted in her skirt. August took half a step forward, then stopped. One step more, and the balance would shatter completely. Edgar smiled. "Nothing warm lived in it? Go to the tent," he told Clara. Then he turned back to Nia. "We'll talk later." Nia did not wait for later. As the camp sank into uneasy silence and the fire dimmed to embers, she gathered what little she owned. A coat, a small bag, no keepsakes to slow her hands. She stepped beyond the ring of light and let the darkness take her. She did not run. She moved with the certainty of someone who had already decided. The wind cut sharp. The ground was uneven. Still, with every step away, the weight on her chest eased just enough to keep her moving. August noticed she was gone during his rounds. He did not ask Edgar. He did not tell anyone. He followed the tracks, the wind, the thin moonlight. When he found her, she sat against a rock, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes fixed on nothing. "You shouldn't go alone," he said quietly, stopping a few steps away. She didn't turn right away. "I couldn't stay." August sat down, leaving space between them. "I know. No advice, no orders. Just the understanding that some places become impossible to stand in." The wind rose. Nia shivered. August removed his coat and laid it over her shoulders, slow enough to give her the choice. She pulled it close. "I won't turn myself into something that has to ask permission to exist," she said. August looked at her. "You're not." He extended his hand, not touching her, just placing it where she could take it if she wished. After a beat, she did. Their fingers closed, not tight but certain. They sat like that a long while, breathing in time with the wind. When she leaned against his shoulder, it felt like a long-delayed reflex. He shifted just enough to steady her. The kiss came later, brief, unclaimed, as if to confirm they were both still themselves. They slept outside the camp under open sky. At dawn, August woke first and did not move. Some nights cannot be returned from, not because of what happens, but because of what you refuse to be afterward. The storm came faster than expected. The sky darkened without warning. Wind struck sideways, metallic in scent. The cattle felt it first, shifting, pressing inward. Thunder rolled close enough to shake the ground. August shouted orders as the herd broke. Edgar did not hesitate. He spurred his horse toward safer ground. Clara froze, her horse lurching beneath her. "Clara!" Nia shouted, running toward her. A steer thundered past, close enough to scorch the air. August rode against the surge, then jumped down when his horse slipped. A disoriented steer charged. August shoved Nia aside and took the impact, the breath driven from him. "Go," he ordered, hauling Clara free. They ran at an angle, cutting across the flow. Rain slammed down. Nia slipped. August caught her wrist and pulled her up without letting go. They reached a low rock outcrop and took shelter as the herd thundered past. Clara looked toward the path Edgar had taken. He did not return. The understanding settled without words. When the storm eased, Edgar came back. His gaze passed over them without comment. August met his eyes and did not look away. The storm stripped more than land. It stripped choice bare. Morning came slowly. Clara sat alone, hands wrapped around cold water. Edgar spoke briskly of losses. Nia sat beside Clara and handed her a dry cloth. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "You don't need to," Nia replied. Edgar approached. "We need to talk." "Here is fine," Nia said. "Do you think you can refuse?" "I've seen enough," Edgar scoffed. "He's hired help." "He chose," Nia replied. Clara spoke then, voice steady. "I waited for you to come back." Edgar's authority cracked in silence. "What do you want?" he asked Nia. "Stop pretending you care about people you won't protect." Edgar warned her about roads and ownership. "I remember who didn't turn back," Nia said. Edgar turned away. Clara followed him later, then stopped him. "I'm not going on." "I won't marry you." The camp stilled. Edgar tried habit, warning, control. None held. "I'm listening to myself," Clara said. She walked away. Edgar stood alone, diminished not by accusation but refusal. The camp moved differently after that. Clara breathed as if setting down a weight. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like." "No one does," Nia answered. The old roles loosened. Leaving happened quietly. Nia packed little. At dawn she stepped away. Clara nodded to her once. August noticed she was gone and followed. He did not rush. When he reached her, neither was surprised. "You don't need to," she said. "I know," he replied. He gave her the reins. "Take the horse. And you?" "I'll walk back." They stood close. No promises, only certainty. Nia rode on. August turned back. Both carried the same full silence. The years did not arrive as a single turning. They came slowly. Their ranch stood on poor land no one wanted. August set posts. Nia built the kitchen. The work was hard. Some nights they wandered without speaking. They stayed. People noticed slowly. Winter tested them. They sold part of the herd to save the rest. Spring came. One afternoon, August called Nia's name from the yard. She answered without weight. Clara visited once, simpler, steadier. "You built this?" "We did." Time moved. The ranch grew enough. The door stayed slightly open. Travelers came and went. No questions demanded. At night, silence was where the day was set down. Nia remembered the road she once took with nothing in her hands. It no longer hurt. Because of it, she knew when to open the door before someone had to knock. Years that followed did not announce themselves as a new chapter. They unfolded quietly, one morning laid carefully atop the next. The way dry ground takes in water after a long season without rain. There was no day they named as a beginning. Only moments when they realized they were still standing, still working, still choosing each other without ever having said the words aloud. The ranch they built sat on the far edge of the valley where the soil was thin and stubborn and the wind never fully rested. No one competed for that land. It was dismissed as too hard, too exposed, too far from anything that mattered. That was why it was right. August drove the first posts himself. Hands blistered, shoulders sore. Measuring not for show but for endurance. Nia built the kitchen from salvaged boards, fitting each piece with care, not because it had to look right, but because it had to hold. Nothing came easily. Water had to be hauled from a distant source, every bucket earned. Fences broke under constant wind and had to be set again and again until they learned where the land would allow strength and where it demanded patience. Their first herd was small and sickly, animals too thin for pride, requiring more attention than they had planned. There were nights they sat by a low fire, listening to wind press through gaps in unfinished walls, wondering without saying it if they had misjudged everything. Neither voiced the question. It would not have changed the work waiting for them at first light. August rose before dawn. Nia matched his rhythm. Cooking, repairing, keeping records, learning the language of the land by necessity rather than instruction. She learned to tell the difference between the sound of a sick animal and the sound of wind slipping under a door. Every skill she gained was not a triumph, but a reclaiming, a piece of ground she no longer had to ask for. They did not speak often of the past, not because it had been erased, but because it had settled into place, no longer pressing for explanation. At times, Nia thought of the old house without anger. The memory stood at a distance, like a structure she had walked out of, and no longer needed to revisit. She was no longer the figure at the edge of someone else's light. Here the light fell where she stood. People in the valley noticed them slowly. First came nods on the road, brief and cautious. Then questions, small and practical, borrowing a tool, asking after the herd. No one asked where they came from. No one spoke Edgar Blackwell's name in their presence. This ranch existed by steady presence alone. One winter came harder than the others. Snow piled deep, higher than anyone remembered. The wind cut sharper, driving drifts against the house until even the door protested. Feed ran low. The herd weakened. Nia suggested selling part of it to save the rest. August listened. They argued through the details, not to win but to understand. They decided together. When spring finally returned and the ground showed itself again, damp and quiet, the ranch was still there. Smaller, perhaps, but intact. Nia noticed the change in herself on an ordinary afternoon. She stood on the porch, ledger open, pencil balanced in her hand. August called her name from the yard. Not loudly, not urgently, just because he needed her. She stepped out without the familiar tightening in her chest. Her name had been spoken as a simple fact. She was not someone staying because there was nowhere else to go. She was someone whose presence mattered. Clara came once. She arrived alone, without finery, without escort. The two sisters sat by the stove, spoke a little, left much unsaid. Clara looked around at the rough walls, the low fire, the open windows. "You built this," she said. "We did," Nia corrected. Clara nodded. When she left, she embraced Nia lightly, not clinging, not apologetic. Time moved on. The ranch grew steadily. Fences held. The herd strengthened. The pace of living softened, no longer rushed, no longer heavy. August and Nia learned to share silence without it becoming empty. Evenings passed with no need to discuss tomorrow. Tomorrow would arrive on its own. One morning, Nia stood on the porch and watched the road stretch outward, the same road that once carried her away with nothing in her hands. She did not need to return to prove anything. This place had already done its work. Some people are not born into belonging. They build it slowly by staying, by choosing, by refusing to let anyone be pushed outside again. Nia understood that now, and this time it could not be taken from her. The house changed little with the years. The porch remained low and worn. The hearth burned steady, never showy. The one difference was the door. It was rarely shut all the way. Not from carelessness, but because the house had learned to leave a margin for someone else to step inside. Nia noticed it one early morning when light washed slowly across the valley. August had been out since before dawn. His footsteps had long since blended into the land's rhythm. She stood at the threshold, hand resting on the frame, listening to the house breathe. The first to arrive was a young man, horse-tired, clothes worn thin. He stood on the porch, uncertain, not daring to knock. Nia opened the door before he had to decide. She did not ask where he came from. She did not ask how long he intended to stay. She set the kettle on the stove, pulled a chair back, and let him sit when he was ready. Others followed over time. A woman traveling alone, hands rough with work, needing rest for the night. A small family lost on the road when the wind turned. No promises were made, no reasons demanded. They stayed long enough, then moved on when they could. August understood without discussion. He added a longer bench to the porch, hung extra pegs in the kitchen. Each change was small, placed where it belonged, as if the house itself knew what it needed. At night, after guests settled, they sat by the fire. Silence between them was no longer a gap. It was where the long day could be laid down. Sometimes Nia remembered the road she had once taken, with nothing in her hands. The memory no longer ached. It stood still like a marker. Because of it, she recognized those who lingered at the edge of the light as she once had. And because of that, she knew when to open the door before anyone had to knock. Clara wrote letters. Short ones. Not often. A few lines about learning to manage on her own. About days that were hard, but no longer frightening. Nia read them, folded them, placed them in a drawer. Not to cling to them, but to know that lives could move forward in different directions without being lost. One afternoon, an older man stopped at the gate, his horse breathing hard. He studied the house quietly before speaking. When Nia stepped out, he asked softly, "Is there somewhere I might sit for a while?" Nia opened the gate. That was enough. Night came. Guests slept. Nia stood on the porch, lamplight reflecting in the window. She thought of the things once called family, built on obligation and silence. Then she looked at this place. No declarations, only presence. August joined her, close enough to block the wind. "It's turning cold," he said. "It is," she replied. They went inside and closed the door just enough to keep the wind out while light still spilled onto the porch. A habit formed without a name. Nia understood that not everyone who came would stay, and not everyone who stayed would become family in the usual sense. But some families begin not with love, but with the decision to never push anyone outside again. This house lived by that choice, quietly, persistently. By then, the valley knew the ranch without needing to name it. People spoke of it indirectly, the place past the bend where the fence always stood straight, where the door was never fully shut. Travelers adjusted their routes without quite admitting why. Some stayed a night, some stayed a season, a few stayed long enough to stop counting how long they had been there. Leah grew older without noticing the moment it began. Her hands bore the record of work done honestly. Her back ached some mornings. Her laughter came easier than it ever had before. She no longer watched the road with expectation, only awareness. There was a difference. August aged differently. His hair silvered at the temples. His movement slowed, but his steadiness did not. He still rose before dawn, still checked the fences, still stood beside her at night without needing to be asked. They never married. They never explained. Nothing was missing. One autumn, the land changed hands around them. New owners, new fences, new rules spoken loudly and often. Men came with papers and measurements, with voices that assumed agreement before it was given. August listened. Nia listened. When the men finished talking, Nia said calmly, "No." The men were surprised. They always were. "This land isn't marked," one said. "It's lived on," she replied. They left, unsettled but unwilling to push further. They would not be the first to learn that some refusals do not need force behind them, only certainty. That winter was the quietest yet. Snow fell gently. The house held warmth easily now. Repairs were fewer. The land no longer fought them. It knew them. One night, August did not wake before dawn. Nia noticed because the silence was different. She sat with him as light crept through the window. He breathed shallowly, then not at all. There was no drama, no fear, just the stillness of something completed. She did not call out. She did not beg the moment to reverse itself. She rested her forehead against his hand and stayed until the house acknowledged what had changed. They buried him on the rise overlooking the valley, where the wind passed cleanly and the fence line remained true. People came, not crowds, just those who belonged to this place in the way it allowed belonging. No speeches were made, no promises offered. He did not need them. Life continued. It always does. Nia carried on, slower, perhaps, more deliberate. She taught others the work she once learned out of necessity. She corrected gently. She listened more than she spoke. When her hands tired, others took up the weight without being asked. The door remained open. Years later, no one marked how many, a young woman stood at the edge of the porch at dusk. She held a small bag. Her eyes moved quickly, measuring, ready to retreat. Nia saw her from inside. She did not wait. She opened the door before the girl knocked. "Come in," Nia said. The girl hesitated. "I don't know how long I can—" "That's all right," Nia replied, already setting a kettle on the stove. The girl stepped inside. The door closed gently behind her, not fully, just enough to keep the wind out. Later that night, Nia stood alone on the porch. The valley stretched wide and quiet, unchanged in all the ways that mattered. She thought briefly of the road she once walked with nothing in her hands and no promise ahead of her. She smiled, not because it had been easy, but because she had kept going. Some lives end with monuments, others end with echoes. This one did neither. It remained. A door left open, a light that did not demand, a place where no one had to ask permission to exist, and that was enough.